Well, she's lying. I mean, Charlie Kirk targeted nobody. He was not racist in any way. I've listened to hours and hours and hours and hours of Charlie Kirk debates and talks, and have been with Charlie Kirk and did events with Charlie Kirk and knew Charlie Kirk. There wasn't a racist bone in his body. To say that he was continuously targeting people of color is nothing but a malicious smear on the very day that people are remembering Charlie, and he's going to be laid to rest. And so I think we need to combine the no votes on the resolution, and then you look at the leading Democratic voices like Ilhan Omar and Jasmine Crocker, who've gone out to smear Charlie before he's even had his funeral. When I hear people say we need to come together and both sides need to turn down the rhetoric, a lot of the people saying that need to look inward right now. I was shocked at that. Well, I guess I shouldn't say I'm shocked by her, but I was a little stunned by what happened this morning.
Before I get to my brother Irami, I want to address this, and it's disappointing because there are times I like Scott Jennings when he gets it on CNN and he mixes it up and he calls out what I call the hypocriticalness of liberal politics and of the Democrats, and I've been on the record doing that. And sometimes people don't like it, but I do think Scott's point of view is much needed. Also feel that Shamichael Singleton does a good job as well as adding a different point of view to a totally liberal point of view that they paint. And yeah, but this is making me look at Scott Jennings in a whole other way. And I said to people, Scott's good on everything except race. He sucks on race. People are like, no, he doesn't, Tim. Yes, he does. Scott knows damn well what Charlie Kirk was doing. But he doesn't want to classify that as racism. When he scapegoats, when he gaslights Black Americans on certain issues, he's doing it for a reason. And it's a racial element to it. And I've been looking at the ways to say this, to express it, so that people can understand what I'm saying. It's easy to just say somebody's racist. And then they say, well, how so? And I think it's important to say how so, because you want to actually define a thing. I mean, if we want to do some good here, if you actually want to add to the conversation, if you actually want to educate people, if you want to wake people up, because I'm seeing a lot of Black Americans who I do not feel are bad people. They're not selling out for a bag. Not all of them. Some people just don't get it. They need to be explained. The different forms. Okay, so if Charlie Kirk wasn't just going at the college campuses and saying the N-word and saying, I don't want to date you and I don't want you around my kids and I don't want to live around you. If he's not saying that, that doesn't mean he's not racist. And it doesn't mean he's not weaponizing race. You don't have to say the N-word to be a racist. You do not have to say you want Black people away from you and Black people stink. They're bad people. You don't have to use those days are over. Typically, unless you're even Stephen Miller doesn't speak in that way. Now it's coded. Bull Connor, the days of Bull Connor and the Dixiecrats, who were even Lyndon Johnson. These people talk very plainly and bluntly in their racism. They wore it on their sleeves. But the racism that we see now from the Republicans and sometimes from Democrats too, in the public sphere, family, it's not that direct. And you got to be able to ascertain it. So in a pursuit of doing that, I ran across a clip of my brother Irami. Before we go any further, let me let you know the Tim Black Wolfpack is dedicated, committed, 10 toes down to reporting the truth, unbiased, and not working for any political party. If that sounds good to you, go to jointimblack.com, become a member of the Tim Black Wolfpack. Irami's a good brother. Go follow him at the Funky Academic. In fact, if you can support this brother, it would be great.
Right. And the interpretation of facts, racist. So like human facts about Black people in America, in the absence of the historical context, in the absence of like understanding and expressing and dramatizations and all of the ways in which we are communicated how Black people were targeted by culture all the way down to government, and all Black institutions were targeted. And now we're living the result of all of that targeting if you don't understand that, then you just look at the outcomes and you say, like, well, they're just biologically deficient. And Charlie Kirk is one of those guys who would just look at the outcomes and then just kind of wave his hands and throw up his hands about any sort of systemic reasons or not take those seriously. Everything was kind of moralized. And this is in America where culture is handed down through institutions, and all black institutions were bleached, DDT'd or whatever.
So I'm gonna put this in a way that so you walk into a room. You walk into a room and there's dirt everywhere, there's trash everywhere, and they're and you look at the person who was in the room or not in the room, not even at the room at the time. They're walking down the hall. You say, "Hey man, why is this room so junky? Why are you living this way? What is this?" And you guys are horrible. You stink. You're not taking care of what you were given. And you just walk out and you go tell everybody, yeah, the way this person lives and the way they keep their house is disgusting. You don't stop to look and see that person, there was a storm that came through. The storm ripped through, and it came through the water. Water came through, a flood came through, and it caused massive destruction to the room. It's nothing that, it's not something that was done by the homeowner. And they haven't had the ability to clean it up because it's going to cost money. So they're doing what they can to fix it up. But you don't care to hear the explanation. Right? You just looked at what it was and say that, obviously, and you assign all types of negative traits to those people. And you say, these people did this. And then when we say, no, it was the flood. It was a flood that did it. In this case, we're talking flood. We're talking a natural disaster. I'm not even putting this on people in my analogy. We'll do that later. This is what Charlie Kirk, and not just Charlie Kirk, this is what Scott Jennings, this is what they all do. They look at the black community and they say, look at the condition of the black community. And then too many times they get black folks to just focus on what they're saying instead of looking at any of the cause and effects. And then they say, when you point out there was a flood that came through here that ripped through, that we did not control the flood, we didn't control the water, we didn't build the dam system, that, by the way, someone turned the switch and opened the levees on our side of town on purpose. They don't even want to have that conversation. When you start telling them that, they say, you're making excuses. You're making excuses because you don't want to get in here and fix it. You don't want to repair it. You don't want to do the work. It's always someone else's fault. No, this is someone else's fault. We don't control the infrastructure. We don't control the dam. We didn't turn the knob. These people did. Too many times I see black people, and it's one of the hazards of social media, man. We got people who haven't had the ability or haven't had the foresight to look past what these people are saying and say, okay, how to get this way? They let these people set the framing up, and then they just sit in it and say, oh, well, you got a point. You got a point. Instead of saying, well, how to get that way? And then they'll bring up some stupid thing. They'll bring up, well, what about the Chinese? Well, you didn't open the dam on the Chinese families. You didn't open the dam on the Latino families. You let them in. You didn't open the dam on the Egyptian families, the Indian families, that own the hotels. You made up way for them. We've been selectively shut out. And when you say stuff like that, they say, oh, there we go, victimhood. That's victim shit. There they go being victims. No, it's actual victims. Actually having that experience in your lineage, in your family, going back culturally. This is what happened to black people. And they don't want to acknowledge it. That's why people are fighting over what's in the history books. But let's go back to Irami as he gets into another deep point. I don't want to go too far.
And so he was that kind of racist, which I think is a very common kind of racist. And I've talked about this before, about how if you ask a regular Oregonian about why there aren't black people in Oregon, they'll tell you, well, I don't know, maybe they just never came to Oregon. But then you study a little bit of Oregon history, you realize black people couldn't buy land until 1926.
Yep.
1926. And if you don't know that by 1926, all the good land is taken, right? So black people could not buy land until 1926. So of course, if you can't buy land until 1926, you're not going to have generational wealth. And miscegenation was illegal until the late 50s, early 60s. So there's just no old money, old black money in Oregon.
Miscegenation, that's where black people can move into the neighborhoods and co-live with white people.
All the money is white, or recently Asian. And so all that Nike money, all that Hewlett-Packard money, you can, but if you just look at the outcomes and say, like, well, black people don't own anything in Oregon. What's up? What's going on with that?
And it's racist. I feel like it's very racist, but it's a soft type of racism where they just make assumptions that it's a moral failure of black people. And once again, like, I get it, they're racist. That's why they're doing it. The painful part is when you got black people who accept that framing about themselves and about me and about my kids and my wife and my family and my friends. They don't accept any proof. You don't have to prove to the Anton Daniels. You don't have to prove to CJ Pearson. You don't have to prove to these people. You don't have to prove to Candace Owens. Your point, you can just say it. Well, why? Obviously, if it's in this condition, why haven't black people fixed it? Why haven't they repaired it? They don't care how it got that way. They don't care that was on purpose. They don't care that was reinforced by the system to keep it that way. America could put people on the moon. America could do all types of great things. We're a superpower. If America really wanted to help repair black people after 400 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow, who didn't really get rights till the 70s, they could, they would. You think they didn't do it because we did something wrong, because we didn't want it. We didn't want equality, though we died to try to get it. So that's the frustrating part. But let's go back to Irami.
And it's abstracted from history. If you actually knew, then the question would turn like, all right, so black people, we still haven't made them whole. What are we going to do? What kind of policies do we need in order to make these them whole, seeing as how, we've done this to their institutions, and it's been reproduced. And a quality of dysfunction. And I'll say it, I'm not a huge fan of all aspects of black culture.
Right.
I am not. I think there are some stably dysfunctional aspects that can be tied directly to those features being a response to the lack of autonomous control by black people. It's a lineage argument, and it's a cultural argument that is tied to lineage, not necessarily to skin color, but to lineage and what this nation did to people of this skin color, right? So if you understand black people, you need to understand America and how black people emerged in and through America. And some of the cultural dysfunctions are responses to like living in America, right? So trying to understand black people without understanding lineage, without understanding context is just a form of racism. And I would say it's lazy, but I think it's purposeful.
Yes.
You don't want to understand history.
No.
And especially since your side job is making sure that history isn't taught.
Right.
Right? We want to make sure critical race theory isn't taught. We're going to make sure history is.
Every time I was watching clips of Charlie Kirk, not to cut off Irami, I was watching clips of Charlie Kirk, and when the person he was debating with, and you'll see this if you take time and watch a lot of his content, he cuts them off when they start talking. He cuts them off when they start bringing up cultural things, historical things, and they try to bring them back to the present. But what about now, though? What about now? Why aren't you better now? You know, what's going on now? Wouldn't you agree that how many murders do black people commit? What about now? What about what's happening today? And they don't want to focus on why it exists, how it got that way, the impediments, the problems, the question, like I said, in a lot of these communities, and I'm not a person that supports gang life. There's a reason why gangs came up, though. We all know the Italians started the mafia because they weren't allowed to get in the regular industry. They weren't accepted as they weren't accepted as into whiteness, so they had to create an underworld in order to survive. Everybody understands that's about the Italians. Everybody gets it. We all get it. Jews, the same thing. Meyer Lansky. All of them. We all understand what their struggles were coming over with nothing. Black people had less than nothing. But no one understands black dysfunction, black crime that arose from that, black gangs. They pretend not to understand. And that's the thing. Charlie Kirk and those guys do not want to have a full conversation. And those people were allowed to do what? To assume whiteness. So when people say, what's racist about Charlie Kirk? The framing of the problems, the limited view he wants you to take on purpose of black people. Repeatedly. The only time he talks about historical stuff is to say we need to go back to slavery. We need to go back to Jim Crow. We need to go back to segregation for black people. That's the only time he wants to even say anything historically, is when he can frame it like we should have never given you niggas rights. That's the only time. And if you don't think that's racist, I gotta ask you, and just because he didn't use the N-word when he said it, like I just did, doesn't mean that's not what he's saying. He's trying to win an argument for a party. He's a political operative trying to win arguments for his party, for a MAGA movement. That's why he's funded by billionaire Republicans. They're not giving him money. Democrats aren't giving him money. If he's not a Republican operative, why is he getting funded only by Republicans? Obviously, these people, and there are still people, maybe they don't care where the money comes from, but the money comes from is everything. Where the money comes from is everything. That could be part of why we just had a memorial for him. Maybe he did change. I don't know. Maybe he did have other points of view. I don't know. But what I'm talking about, in the capacity in which I've seen him have those debates, Irami spot on about the way this guy framed things. It's not just him. Ben Shapiro does it all the time. When Ben Shapiro says, F your feelings, he's talking about context. He's talking about context. He just wants to look at the facts that they are now. You are 290 pounds. You don't want to hear that I have gout? You don't want to hear that I broke my leg? I was in a car accident a year ago? I'm still recuperating? I'm saying this is theoretically, hypothetically. To him, that's feelings. That's context to him. It's victimization. Walk it off. What are we doing? You're fat. You need to do something about it. You haven't done anything about it. Obviously, you're lazy. Obviously. And that's racist. Because they're doing it with us as black people. Because if not, they'd be talking about white poverty. They'd be talking about white drug abuse. They'd be talking about white violence. They'd be talking about white domestic violence. They'd be talking about white unaliving, self-unaliving. They'll be talking about all the things. They'll be talking about PDF files. They'll be talking about human trafficking, all the things that plague their communities that for some reason are not talked about, are not being discussed. And that's part of the reason why I say I'm very confident in saying, hey, he was racist. And so it's a whole string of them. Steven Crowder, all the guys on the Daily Wire, all of them. And Candace Owens and those guys and Brandon Tatum and all that whole crew. And the Democrats are racist too, just in a different way. Just in a different way. So when they say, oh, but he doesn't seem racist to me, and what he said was true, that's because you don't know enough to know what you need to know, which is he's framing it in a very racist way to begin with. When you ask an abused person, why don't you like being in groups, and then you blame them for not wanting to be in groups, and didn't ask where they were hit. You don't ask what got them to that situation, and it was intentional too. It wasn't a natural cause. What happened to black people was not natural. It was deliberate. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking it was a natural occurrence just because we failed to meet some type of criteria. Now, when we were successful, they bombed our towns. When we were winning, they took our wins away from us. We had black people that worked 30 years putting a little bit of money away, put it in the bank, and then they took our money out the bank. Look up the Freedmen's Bank. What, 5% of us got any money back? Most of us got nothing of it back? Look it up. Where's the word of white towns that black people bombed out of existence because they were upset that you were doing well? There are no stories like that. You mean to tell me you don't believe that some of those towns, if they existed, we would have more black industry? There are white industries that existed in the early 1900s that still exist. So let's keep going.
Isn't taught. And then we'll just look at the snap. Joe says Charlie Kirk was really like a snap crackle racist. No context, just facts. Yeah, like we'll just look at a snapshot without any historical context, and we won't say that, well, you know, black people are genetically defective, but like if you look at black people in the United States, it's not doing very well. Yeah, but there are reasons for this, and the reasons are actually pretty clear. I mean, you read Mercer Baradovan's The Color of Money. You read Ira Katznelson's book, When Affirmative Action Was White. Like, you read Trouble in Mind by Leon Litwack, and you just see the terrorism that, like, infected and distorted all black meaningful institutions, from their property holdings to their version of religion to our understanding of family and the ability to actually, like, manage a family. Like, you just couldn't do that in Jim Crow because you couldn't control what happened to your kids. And now we're in a liberal society where we don't control any of the production of ideas. So are black people really tell me, chat, are black people really in control of black culture? How much? In what way?
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah, look up in your chat GPT. He said chat, but ask chat GPT, do black people really control their media? Ask a large language model, Grok, Clyde, Gemini, whatever you choose. Ask them. It'll tell you. We're not. And where I do agree with conservatives, where someone like Anton Daniels, who disagree with a lot of stuff he says, but I will agree that there are certain cultural things that we do not control that are negative, that negatively impact Black America. I agree with that. I believe that there are certain types of commercially viable things like hip hop, certain trends, these types of things that are negative, that reinforce negative stereotypes and will reinforce bad culture that impacts us in a negative way, right? I believe that. But we don't control any of it. And then we got people trying to make a living out of it, trying to survive and make a living out of being in that system. And they're willing to do these things. And sometimes they may do it without even knowing what they're doing and how detrimental it is to the community. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, right? But at the end of the day, do you think the people that are masterminding, the people that are funding it, the people that are making money off it, don't know? And see, that's why I lose it with the conservatives, because they don't want to admit. They just want to look at the rapper. They want to look at Lil Wayne and say what Lil Wayne is saying, or what, and not Lil Wayne, but someone, NBA Young, whatever. They want to look at his lyrics. They don't want to look at the whole industry. Because we've seen, you could take Nipsey out. You could take Pac and, Biggie. Any of these, King Von, any of these people out. And the industry continues. Just plug and play. Put in a new person and have them with the same type of compromised lyrics, the same type of compromised morals to project the same imagery that perpetuates the problems. And that's just one industry. It may be, we don't know what it would look like if we had our own industries, we're in control of our own industries, control of our own programming, gave ourselves our own media. We don't know if there will be a change in the output. I want to thank Irami Osei-Frimpong. Once again, go to thefunkyacademic.com. Hit him up there. Join his community, and also hit him up on YouTube. Much respect to him. I was glad to talk to him. It was great having him as a guest about 5 years ago, I think it was, and I love to have him back. But until then, go to his channel. Check him out over there. All right. So when they say, for just to wrap it up, when they say, oh, Charlie Kirk wasn't racist, I think a lot of people don't even know what to look for. The framing of our issues were done in racist, and in racist ways, to perpetuate racist thought, racial negative bias, anti-black bias. Don't tell me he doesn't know what he's doing when you don't want to get into the context of black people. Because when you discuss black people without context, that's the only time you can say, well, look at the Jewish people that came over, and look at the Koreans. They got a whole country to go back to. They're from a country. What are you talking? How could you possibly compare these people to black Americans? How could you possibly do that? And if you're a black American person, putting up content, reinforcing these negative stereotypes about yourself and not understanding it all, and that's why it's dangerous, man. You know, I support the Second Amendment, but people need to take gun classes. We got black people with TikTok accounts and X accounts and YouTube accounts who don't know how to handle the gun of race, who just shooting indiscriminately, sideways in it, all that, and hitting all of us in the process. And I don't know if it's intentional, but I believe that Elon gave the gun for a reason. And I believe that's why I keep seeing you on my algorithm. That's why you got all them bullets.
The Tim Black Show streams Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Wolfpack.